And center stage with Jared Bowen, the magic behind the staging of Rusalka. Tomorrow night is the opening of Boston Lyric Opera's Rusalka at the Schubert Theater. If you're not familiar with the Dvorak piece, you can be excused, since this will be the first time since its 1901 Prague premiere that it's being fully staged here in Boston. Jared Bowen has a preview and why this production looks like no other.
Hers is a yearning and love inherently flawed. Inspired by European fairy tales, Anton Dvorak's opera Rusalka centers upon a water sprite of the title, desperately in love with a prince who frequents the forest above her shimmering water.
The design team, the director, they really managed to put you into another plane, another sphere, and you're allowed to dream. And it's gorgeous, and the music lends itself to that as well.
Their love is sealed, as any rich fairy tale allows, by a witch, her potions, and a few unfortunate and binding conditions.
Even though it's sort of The Little Mermaid, it doesn't end well. Nobody is happy at the end, except the audience, hopefully. You know, everybody dies. It's not a good place.
But it looks spectacular. Rusalka's Slavic mythological world above and below the water is created entirely by digital projections. Waves ripple, clouds pass, and branches sway. The sky appears as though painted by one of the old masters.
It is my goal to make people hear the music through the pictures. I think that the interaction of sight and sound is very deep, and if you think about it and you work with it carefully enough, you can use the way images move and change to enhance our hearing of the music.
To create Rusalka scenery, projections designer Wendell Harrington discovered the Czech landscape that most likely inspired Dvorak was not unlike her own in upstate New York.
I'm a swimmer, and so the first thing I did was go look at a lot of ponds and lakes and photograph the pond scum, and I tried to get low under the water with my camera just to see what it really was.
While ideas of projection date back to Wagner, Harrington says its efficiency and relative low cost have made it an increasingly dominant theatrical device today.
You're not going to put this rabbit back in the hat. This is, I think, digital projection is certainly here to stay, and for good reason. It gives a lot of potential, and also for people who don't have the ability to build a lot of scenery, because you can make extraordinary work. You're only held back by your imagination.
It's a revolution of sorts for the Boston Lyric Opera, just as Rusalka was for Dvorak a century ago, says the BLO's new artistic director, Esther Nelson.
Dvorak also made a national statement, if you will, that an opera could be written in his native tongue and be performed in his native tongue. So it accomplishes that as well, and his gorgeous music is just, it just moves you incredibly.
Rusalka, drowned in love, but breathtaking to behold.
And Jared Bowen is here. Oh, you gave it away. That's great. This looks fantastic. First of all, how come it hasn't been staged, or it isn't frequently staged anywhere?
It's because people mainly concentrate on Dvorak's music, and he has such rich ties. He had several musical premieres here in Boston, but just not opera. As Wendell Harrington pointed out, kind of with humor, that there's a lot of libretto holes in this piece. The story isn't completely well told. I mean, you're largely there for the music, although it's a really kind of enchanting story, despite how it ends.
We were remarking a couple of weeks ago how Dirty Dancing used all these projections and digital imagery, but this looks like it's at a whole other level.
It really is, and it's funny because I had talked to Wendell Harrington about this a while ago, and I was really kind of skeptical, I guess being somewhat of a purist. And then we saw Dirty Dancing, and I was really impressed by that. And then to walk in here where it completely envelops the Schubert, I mean, everything feels like it really takes place in this forest, and it's not the least bit distracting. I'm completely won over.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, about the sort of the purity of the stage, and now it's this integration of really a completely new media into it, because the whole idea of the stage was always the center of the actors or the singers, and now the imagery, the staging is really kind of a big part of
Well,
it.
they're very careful about that, and I asked that, how do you avoid having competing images? And they are very careful with the movement and making sure that there's not a lot of movement happening on the stage or on the screen behind or in the scrims that come down, which also gives it that depth. They use still images there. And it doesn't always work. And Wendell Harrington said she's actually in the position now of often telling theater companies not to use it because it's so inexpensive and it's so easy to do that a lot of people want to do it.
So that was my question. It's less expensive than regular staging.
Oh, absolutely, because you don't have to spend weeks creating the scenery, but it doesn't always work. I just saw Blythe Spirit on Broadway, the Noel Coward play. That could never work with projections because it all takes place in a 1940s English room, and they're coming in and out of doors and windows, and they have props.
They could probably try it. All right, Jerry Bowen, that was fascinating. Thanks a lot.